Gunabandha vidhatesham kartrutvam tannivartanam gatitraya swamulatvam chaturdasha udiryate. This is the summary shloka of the 14th chapter from the Gita Sangraha of Swami Yamunacharya. Gunabandha Vida. The process of how the gunas cause bondage. Tesham katrutvam. How the gunas are the actual drivers of all our actions. Tan nivartanam. How to overcome the forces of the gunas. How to transcend the gunas. Gatitraya swamulatvam. Bhagavan being the source of all the three rewards, be it Aishwaryam or Kaivalyam or Bhagavat Prapti. Chaturdasha Udiryate. The 14th chapter covers these four topics. Gunabandha Vidha, Tesham Kartrutvam, Tan Nivartanam, Gatitraya Swamulatvam. Interestingly, the 14th chapter is a continuation of Krishna's exposition on Achit Tattva. It does not begin with Arjuna's question. Arjuna's 16th question comes later, towards the end of 14th chapter. Kairlingais Three Gunas atito bhavati prabho kimacharaha katham chaitans Three Gunas ativartate. Arjuna's 16th question. We have been relishing the series of Arjuna's questions throughout the Gita and Krishna's brilliant responses. The 16th question posed by Arjuna is about transcending the gunas of Prakriti. Kairlingais Three Gunanetan atito bhavati prabho kimacharaha katam chaitan Three Gunan ativartate. The question is all about knowing the one who has transcended the gunas and how to transcend the gunas. Let us first understand the context for this question. Krishna concludes the 13th chapter with a profound declaration. The 13th chapter, Kshetragya Vibhaga Yoga. After detailing the Kshetra and the Kshetragya, after a deep dive into the nature of the Kshetra and the Kshetragya, towards the end of the chapter, Krishna declares, Kshetra Kshetragyayo Jnanam Antaram Jnana Chakshusha Bhuta Prakriti Moksham Cha Evidur Yantite Param. Bhuta Prakriti Moksham Cha. In order to attain freedom from Prakriti and attain the supreme state of self-realization, Bhuta Prakriti Moksham Cha Evidur Yantite Param, the supreme state of self-realization and gaining freedom from Prakriti, from the clutches, from the prison house of samsara, the only way is discriminatory knowledge, Krishna says. Kshetra Kshetragyayo Jnanam. It is a prerequisite to discriminate between Kshetra and Kshetragya. The Kshetragya, the indweller in the Kshetra, the knower of the Kshetra, the Purusha, the Jivatma, residing in the body made up of Prakriti, the Kshetra, has to have the Viveka Jnana. The Viveka Jnana, the discriminatory knowledge, the ability to discriminate. Viveka Jnana, Viveka is like the cutting edge of knowledge. Material knowledge is like a knife without a cutting edge, a blunt knife. There is no use of a knife which is blunt. Viveka is the cutting edge that can cut through the surface of delusion and enable access to the substance of reality. Viveka enables us to cut through the surface of delusion and access the substance of reality. With material knowledge, the intelligence, which is like a blunt knife without any cutting edge, one only perceives the surface of reality. One only deals with the surface of reality. And by perceiving the surface of reality, one mistakes the surface of reality, which is Prakriti, matter, to be the whole of reality. Therefore, Viveka, the cutting edge of knowledge, is required, the discriminatory knowledge is required to cut through the facade of enjoyment in material life and realize the immanence and imminence of misery. Enjoyment in material life, embedded within this enjoyment is misery. Only with Viveka, one can cut through this facade of enjoyment in material life. Only with Viveka, the cutting edge of discrimination, one can look beyond the austerities, the initial austerities on the spiritual path, and realize the latent joy, the bliss. Therefore, Krishna, concluding 13th chapter, categorically declares, Kshetra Kshetrajnayo Jnanam Antaram Jnana Chakshusha, he says. Jnana Chakshu. It is with the eyes of knowledge. It is only with the eyes of knowledge one can perceive the difference between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna. One can perceive the difference between one's own self and one's body, the physical body. And one can perceive reality beneath the surface of Prakriti. Antaram Jnana Chakshusha. Bhuta Prakriti Mokshamcha Evidur Yantite Param. With Jnana Chakshu, with the eyes of knowledge, one can then also realize the process for liberation from Prakriti, from the clutches of Prakriti, from the bondage, the prison house of samsara. The process of how to get liberated, how to get freed from the prison of samsara and attain that supreme state of self-realization. Krishna, earlier in the 13th chapter, had also clearly pointed out to the cause for samsara, for this repeated births and deaths, for this repetition of the cycle. Krishna, in the midst of explaining Kshetra and the Kshetrajna and detailing the nature of Prakriti and Purusha, also talked about the association between Prakriti and Purusha being Anadi, and he also explained Prakriti, Purusha, Prakritistohi, Bhunte, Prakritijan Gunan, Karanam Gunasangosya, Sadasad Yoni Jagmasu. Purusha, Prakritistohi, Bhunte, Prakritijan Gunan. The Purusha, the Jivatma, seated in the body, made of Prakriti, Bhungte Prakritijan Gunan, continues to experience the products of Prakriti, continues to experience the world of matter, and gets attached to Prakriti, to the world of matter. And it is because of this attachment to the gunas, Karanam Gunasangosya. It is attachment to the gunas of Prakriti, Sadasad Yoni Janmasu. The Jiva continues to revolve in the cycle of samsara. Birth after death, after birth, after death, continues. Sadasad Yoni Janmasu, and depending on the kind of punya or papa that the Atma accumulates, different kinds of janma are acquired. Sadasad Yoni Janmasu. Karanam Gunasangosya. Guna, the Karana, the cause for this repeated births, for this repetition of samsara, of this birth, for the cause for the Atman to be entangled, to be trapped in the cycle. Krishna declared the cause is the gunas of Prakriti. So therefore, Krishna continues to expand on what he covered in the 13th chapter and goes on to explain the three gunas of Prakriti. Krishna in the 14th chapter takes the opportunity. Earlier in the Gita, Krishna had briefly covered the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, but it is in the 14th chapter that he makes a deep dive. Prakriti, insentient matter, is constituted of three elements, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The three gunas are the operating principles of Prakriti. They have to be understood not as just qualities. Gunas are not like the color of a cloth, which is the color of a cloth is different and distinct from the cloth, or the fragrance of a rose, which is distinct and different from the rose. The gunas of Prakriti, the constituent elements of Prakriti, are to be understood just as the three strands of a three-stranded rope. The three strands of a rope, the three-stranded rope, are the very material of the rope. Similarly, the three gunas of Prakriti are the very materiality of matter. They are the very stuff with which Prakriti is made up of. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, the three gunas of Prakriti, are the building blocks, the fundamental building blocks of this world of matter. This material creation is made up of the three gunas. Our physical bodies are the products of the three gunas. Our subtle bodies, the mind and the intellect, are the products of three gunas. Our personalities are the products of the three gunas. The three gunas are also the mental dispositions. The three gunas are also the mental dispositions. And therefore, the qualities of the mind, the attitude that drives our actions are determined by the three gunas. So they are also the mental qualities, the mental makeup, our personalities. So Krishna goes at length talking about the nature of Prakriti, the nature of these three gunas, the process of how the three gunas binds the jiva in samsara, how the gunas drive the nature of our actions. And he also talks about how to overcome the influence of the three gunas. And it is in that context Arjuna raises the question. Arjuna raises his 16th question, where he says, "Hey Krishna, I would like to know the characteristics of that person who has transcended, the three gunas of Prakriti. Kairlingais Threen Gunan, Kairlingais Threen Gunan Etan, Atito Bhavati Prabho, Kimachara, Katham Chaitan, Threen Gunan Ativartate. Kairlingais Threen Gunan. Kairlingais, Linga. Linga means signs, symbols, signs, marks, characteristics. Kairlingais Threen Gunanetan Atitaha. Atitaha. What are the characteristics of that person who has transcended the three gunas of Prakriti? What are his characteristics? Kairlingais. Kimachara. Achara here is behavior. What is the behavior of a person who has transcended three gunas? How can we recognize a person who has transcended these three gunas? Kairlingaihi kimachara. Therefore, here we need to understand that Arjuna wants to know the internal characteristics and the external characteristics of that person who has transcended. Guna Treen Gunanetan Atitaha. gunAtita. A gunAtita is one who has transcended the three gunas of Prakriti. One who has overcome the influence of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Arjuna wants to know the internal characteristics and the external characteristics of such a person, such a gunAtita, one who has transcended the three gunas of Prakriti. Kimachara Katam Chaitan Treen Gunan Ativartate. There are three questions that Arjuna has within this question. Kairlingaihi Kimachara Katam Etan Treen Gunan Ativartate. The third question is how to transcend. What is the process? If a person has transcended the gunas of Prakriti, what is the process of transcending the gunas of Prakriti? Krishna answers these three questions of Arjuna through 5 shlokas. 2 shlokas to answer the question on Kairlingaihi. 2 shlokas to answer the question of Kimacharaha. And 1 shloka to answer the question how to transcend. Katam Chaitan Treen Gunan Ativartate. How to transcend the 3 gunas of Prakriti. Krishna answers Arjuna's question. Krishna says, hey Arjuna, let me first give you the signs, how the internal characteristics of that gunAtita. Now, in the process of knowing how to recognize the internal characteristics and external characteristics of a gunAtita, we also get to know the process of becoming a gunAtita as well. Then Krishna declares, Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohameva cha pandava. Nadveshti sampravrittani na nivrittani kamkshati. A very beautiful shloka which in a way summarizes the forces, how the 3 gunas operate. Operation of these 3 gunas in our lives, this operation of these 3 gunas is inevitable. Because as long as the jiva is embodied, the physical body is made up of 3 gunas. The entire world with which we deal with on a day-to-day basis is made of 3 gunas. So therefore, it is important to recognize there is no escaping these 3 gunas. It is about how to deal with them and how to overcome the forces. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohameva cha pandava. Hey Pandava, Krishna talks about Three key things here: Prakasha, Pravritti, Moha. Prakasha, illumination. Pravritti, activity. Moha, delusion, confusion, perplexity. Krishna said, Nadveshti sampravrittani. Nadveshti sampravrittani. Sampravrittani. When present, Nadveshti, no hatred. Na nivrittani kankshati. Na kankshati, no longing. Nivrittani, when absent. When present, no hatred. When absent, no longing. What is Krishna referring to? Presence and absence. Krishna says, Arjuna, emotions are unavoidable. Emotions come and go. Emotions are disturbances in our mind. Whether we like it or not, emotions will come and go. There is no way to stop. Emotions are products of the three gunas. All of us are products of the three gunas. The mind is an admixture of three gunas. In each and every entity, the three gunas are present. It is only the mixture, the composition may vary. Even in the most sattvic of people, Rajas and Tamas are present. And even the most tamasic of people, there could be a tinge of sattva. One need to know what guna predominates at any given point in time. It is also not necessary that it is only one guna that predominates all throughout the day. There could be one part of the day where sattva could predominate. There could be another part of the day where tamas could predominate. There could be another part of the day where rajas could predominate. Prakasham cha pravrittim cha mohameva cha pandava. Prakasha, illumination. Illumination is caused by sattva. When sattva dominates, there is goodness. There is clarity of thought. The mind is clear. We feel happy. There is goodness. We feel elated. Everything seems to be very clear. There is a sense of satisfaction and contentment when sattva predominates. Prakasha. Pravritti, activity. When rajas predominates, there is less restlessness. We are driven by passion. We become possessive. There is greed. Activity, there is a compulsion to be active, to engage in doing something or the other. While sattva is revealing in nature, rajas is feeling in nature. Rajas feels action. Sattva reveals reality. Prakasham cha, pravrittim cha, mohameva cha pandava. Moha, delusion. When tamas predominates, we seem to not know what to do. No, the so-called boredom that we experience is because of tamas. Suddenly, things are not clear. We seem not to understand things easily. We are confused, we are perplexed, we are bewildered. Suddenly, everything is dark. Ignorance rules. One becomes lazy. One starts to procrastinate. So, when we analyze our own day-to-day life and living, we see that each and every one of us go through varying phases of the domination of these gunas. Whether we like it or not, it happens. Krishna says, it is freedom from the three gunas, means transcending the gunas even when one is operating within this world. gunAtita is somebody who has not attained moksha. He is still the person continues to still carry out his life and living, but one has understood how to overcome the forces of the three gunas. Nadveshti sampravrittani na nivrittani kankshati, which means emotions come and go. One knows how to handle this coming and going of emotions, knowing that those emotions do not belong to me. The recognition of the fact that these emotions, whether they are sattvic or rajasic or tamasic, these emotions do not belong to me. When we look at the world, we look with our mind. We look at the world, it is like the mind is like our spectacles. Looking, when we use the mind like our spectacles. And with this mind, we see the world with the spectacles. Now, it is important not just to look with the mind, it is also important to look at the mind all the time. Because the spectacles that we wear can change how we interpret, how we see and interpret the world. The color of the spectacles can change. The same thing that I see and interpret could be interpreted differently by somebody else who is wearing a different colored spectacles. The color of the spectacles are the gunas of the mind. So when we look with the mind and see and interpret the world, we also need to look at the mind and understand that this interpretation is because of the color of the mind, the color, the guna that is operating in my mind. Krishna therefore says, it is very important here, Arjuna, the one who transcends the gunas is able to handle is the varying emotions. Emotions come and go. There are some times I'm elated. There are some times I'm depressed. There are some times I'm provoked. There are some times I'm confused. All these things happen. As sattva, rajas, tamas alternate, emotions also alternate. The secret is to let the emotions come and go. And how do I do that? Krishna immediately says, Udasina vadasinaha. Udasina vadasinaha gunairyona vichalyate. Gunavartanta ityeva yovatishtati nengate. Krishna here teaches the art of being an observer. How do I manage these emotions? How do I ensure? How do I let them come and go? By just being an observer, he says. Udasinavat asinaha. One is to be situated as just a witness, just as an observer, without really identifying ourselves with an emotion. The problem starts when we start identifying with the emotion. When one observes and does not give complete attention to that emotion, the emotion will automatically fade away, Krishna says. So, udasina vadasinaha gunairyona vichalyate. Na vichalyate. If one remains as just a witness, witnessing the emotions as they come and go, events, situations, circumstances, the stimuli from outside will trigger emotions in the mind, will trigger thoughts in the mind, which then results in emotions. As long as one remains a witness, observing them without completely giving our full attention to them, gunairyona vichalyate, one stays undisturbed, unperturbed. Gunavartanta ityevam yovatishtati nengate. Gunavartanta ityeva, knowing fully that it is gunas of Prakriti which are interacting with gunas of Prakriti. All the activity is the result of the interaction between the gunas. The body is made up of three gunas, the sense organs are made up of three gunas, the sense objects are made up of three gunas. When the sense organs are interacting with the sense objects, the Atman, the indweller in the body, can remain as a witness, witnessing this interaction. All the activity, not just the physical activity, everything begins with the mind, the mental activity. All the mental activity which manifests as physical activity are the result of the gunas interacting with gunas. Gunavattanta. Gunavattanta ityeva. He says, Gunavattanta ityeva. It is the gunas which are causing all this activity. Knowing that, one remains completely undisturbed. When we all are used to observing the external world, it comes natural to us. But it is equally important, if not even more important, to also constantly observe the inner world. Observing the external world is definitely important, but more important is also constant observance of the inner world. It is through observing the inner world that we can get our actions right in the external world. So Krishna says here that one needs to, the gunAtita is constantly observing the inner world, witnessing what is going on, the thoughts. Just because something is inside us does not mean it is us. Just because something is inside us, we can easily know physical objects which are outside, and we can also know those physical objects are made up of Prakriti. But something inside, not just the mind, but the contents of the mind, even the thoughts. Just because a thought is inside us does not mean it is us. It does not mean it belongs to us. A thought in the mind actually is not our thought. It does not belong to us. It is like, just because there are people inside our house does not mean all belong to us. There could be strangers, there could be visitors, there could be people who are passing by, there could be thieves inside the house. We need to identify what is ours and what is not ours. Thoughts and emotions in the mind, automatically we don't need to identify with them because they don't belong to us. They are products of the three gunas. If we don't give attention to a thought, the thought will subside automatically. Just like how, a hawker walks inside our compound wall, inside, and then starts, loudly selling. If we give our attention to him, his sales pitch gets louder and louder and louder. If we don't give attention to him, soon, not only the sales pitch will go down, he will also walk away. Similarly, a thought that comes in the mind, if it is not given attention, will automatically go away on its own. It is only when we start identifying with it, giving it full attention, a small thought begins like a small wave in the mind and becomes a tsunami in the mind, which completely overpowers and controls us. Therefore, Krishna says, a gunAtita, the one who has transcended three gunas, how does he handle his thoughts and emotions? He too has thoughts and emotions. Thoughts and emotions are unavoidable, but he knows how to handle them, how to manage them, how to transcend them. Udasina vadasina, gunairyona vichalyate. By being a witness, being an observer, and he can easily let go of the thoughts. He can easily let the emotions come and go. Krishna then moves on to the external characteristics of a gunAtita. Samadukha sukhasvastaha, samaloshtasmakanchanaha, tulya priya priyodiraha, tulya nindatma stutihi, Manapamano tulyaha tulya mitrari pakshayo sarvarambha parityagi gunatita samuchyate. Sama dukkha sukha swastaha. Swastaha. The word here to be underlined is swastaha, because sama dukkha sukha. Sama dukkha sukha. One who handles sukha and dukkha equally, alike in sukha and dukkha. Why? He is swastaha. Who is swastaha? One who is situated in his own nature. One who is complete by himself. One who has conquered his incompleteness. One who is situated in the knowledge of his own self. He is swastaha. One who has attained equilibrium and balance. Now, our incompleteness is because of lack of equilibrium and balance. In our life, there are pairs of paradoxical needs pulling us apart all the time. The need for having and giving, the need for individuality and connectedness, the need for order and growth, the need for certainty and uncertainty. These are various conflicting needs that keep pulling us apart. When one manages to attain balance, equilibrium between these conflicting, paradoxical needs, one attains completeness, a sense of completeness. And when one is complete, one is purna, one has no sense of lack of anything, then pain and pleasure, joy and sorrow, one is alike, is not either elated or disturbed. Sama dukkha sukha swastaha. Because one knows that certainty and uncertainty keep alternating all the time. There is order, there is growth, there is change. Sometimes we need order, sometimes we need change and growth, because all the time, if there is only order, it is also boring. And sometimes we also need change, we also need growth. One needs to know, get a balance between certainty and uncertainty, balance between having and giving, balance between individuality. Each and every one of us are unique, but also we are all connected. So balance between individuality and connectedness, balance between having and giving, balance between change, growth, and order. So all of this, if one remains balanced and attains equilibrium, there is a sense of completeness. Sukha and dukkha are no longer an issue to be managed. One is alike in dukkha and sukha. Sama dukkha sukha swastaha. Sama loshta ashva kanchanaha. Loshta ashva kanchanaha samaha. One treats a stone, a pebble, or a piece of iron and gold as the same. Immediately we can ask, how is it possible? If someone has $100 billion, a 10 rupee note or a 10,000 rupee will make no difference to him. If I have $100 billion, I will not be swayed by 10 rupees or 10,000 rupees. The moment I realize my nature, the moment I realize my relationship with Krishna, then being alike to Loshta Ashva Kanchana comes naturally. So gunAtita has the real treasure. Therefore, he is not swayed by material treasure. Sama Loshta Ashva Kanchana. Tulya Priya Priyo Dhiraha. Dhiraha. Dhira is one who can discriminate between Atma and Anatma. Therefore, he is alike in favorable and unfavorable conditions. Tulya Priya Priyo Dhiraha. Tulya Nindatma Samstutihi. Ninda Stuti. Ninda is blaming, criticism. Stuti is praising. One who is alike in criticism and praise. Now immediately Krishna says, Manapamanayos tulyaha. The way Krishna constructs this is very interesting. Tulya nindatma stutihi and manapamano tulyaha. Alike in criticism and praise. alike in honor and dishonor. Now, criticism and praise are what other people do. Honor and dishonor is what we process in our mind. So, irrespective of what other people do, whether we feel honor or dishonor is our own choice. Someone can praise us, we can still get humiliated. Someone can praise us, we can still feel dishonored because they have not praised us enough. Honor and dishonor, therefore, are our own internal processes. Irrespective of what others do to us, what we do to ourselves is more important. So here Krishna says, alike in criticism and praise, alike in honor and dishonor. Manopamano tulyaha, tulya mitra aripakshayo, mitra aripakshayo tulyaha. Alike towards friend and foe. Immediately we may ask, how can this be possible? We must not immediately interpret this as saying Krishna is asking us to treat an enemy as a friend and a friend as an enemy. That is foolishness. All that Krishna is saying that the attitude of others should not influence our own attitude. Compassion towards all is what Krishna is talking about. Because Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight, no doubt. But it is important to understand that Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight against the Kauravas, not because Kauravas are enemies of Pandavas. Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight the Kauravas not as an act of revenge. Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight against the Kauravas not because they are his enemies, because they are enemies of Dharma. Sarvarambha parityagi gunAtita samuchyate. Sarvarambha parityagi. Sarva arambha parityagi. Parityaga here is renunciation. Renouncing sense gratification. Sarvarambha parityagi. Every action that one engages with is driven with a craving for gratification, sense gratification. A gunAtita renounces the need for sense gratification. Sarvarambha parityagi. gunAtita sauchyate. He is the gunAtita. So Krishna here, through 4 shlokas, he covers the internal characteristics of a gunAtita, kairlingaihi, and kimacharaha, the external characteristics of a gunAtita. The third question that Arjuna asked, the third sub-question within the 16th question, how do I transcend the 3 gunas? What is the process by which one can overcome the force of the 3 gunas? Himachara katam chaitan threen gunan ativartate. Transcending the 3 gunas seems to be a formidable task, hey Krishna. How do I overcome the forces of these 3 gunas? Krishna, with 1 shloka, Krishna answers this question. He says, hey Arjuna, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Bhakti yogena sevate is qualified by avyabhicharena. Avyabhichare. Vyabhichara. Avyabhichara. Avyabhichara. Unswerving, unalloyed, uninterrupted, without any distraction, exclusive. The word exclusive needs to be underlined. Exclusive, uninterrupted, unalloyed, unflinching, unswerving devotional service to Krishna. Mamchayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. It is through performing devotional service through bhakti to Krishna that one can overcome the forces of the three gunas. So this seems to be a problem here. What is the problem? What is the cause of distraction and interruption in performance of devotional service? The three gunas. It is the three gunas which are the cause for all the distraction that is happening. If we have to perform devotional service to Krishna, the three gunas prevent us from devoting ourselves to Krishna. So the cause for distraction, the cause is the three gunas. At the same time, Krishna is also saying to overcome the three gunas, it is bhakti. That which is disrupting us in performing bhakti is the three gunas, and it is bhakti which can overcome the three gunas. Seems to be a problem here. How is it possible to solve this problem? It is important to understand that while we are entangled by the three gunas, while we are shackled by sattva, rajas, tamas, there is a little freedom that we do enjoy. While we are not totally free, we are prisoners. We do have a little freedom. Within the prison house, there is a little freedom. Using that little freedom, we need to start practicing bhakti. And slowly that would enable increasing our freedom over a long period of time. The little freedom that we have has to be used to fight against the three gunas to begin with. Initially, it is 1 versus 3. It is 1 versus the 3. Slowly, the jiva, has to befriend sattva guna and fight against rajas and tamas. Then it becomes 2 versus 2. Even that is not an easy battle. Then, when the jiva befriends sattva guna, automatically he would then know that to only win this battle is by partnering with Krishna. Then it becomes a battle between Krishna and my enemies. Then we know who is the winner in this battle. So therefore, the little freedom that we have has to be properly used. And when that little freedom is used, then over a period of time, one can dedicate oneself in devotional service. Avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevit. Krishna here, after detailing the effects of the three gunas, the cause for bondage, and how to transcend the three gunas, is very clearly saying mere intellectual knowledge of the three gunas is not enough. Intellectually knowing the three gunas, the nature of the three gunas, is not enough. Along with the intellectual vision of the three gunas, it is also important to dedicate the heart to Krishna. It is important to understand that one needs to be both emotional and unemotional at the same time. How is it possible? How can I be both emotional and unemotional at the same time? Because we can never be unemotional in our life and living. It is impossible. It is impractical. But so Krishna here is very clearly saying we need to be emotional and unemotional. Now, the focus here should be on the word motion, which is embedded within emotion. Within emotion is embedded a word motion. When the motion of our consciousness is towards the world of matter, then we are materially emotional. When Krishna says we need to be unemotional, he's talking about being materially unemotional. When the motion of our consciousness is towards Krishna, we are spiritually emotional. So therefore, we can be both emotional and unemotional at the same time. Materially unemotional and spiritually emotional. Bhakti Yoga is like the connection with Krishna. The stronger our connection with Krishna, the lesser the influence of the three gunas. No, the three gunas are like small magnets which keep attracting a small piece of iron towards magnets. When you bring in a huge magnet which has a power beyond what the three small magnets are capable of, automatically the piece of iron gets attracted to the large piece of magnet. Now, therefore, the moment bhakti becomes stronger and Krishna starts to attract us, initially, as Bhakti Yoga is practiced, as Krishna says, the connection may be initially weaker, but over a period of time, once we get into that magnetic field where the magnet starts to attract the piece, until an iron piece gets inside the magnetic field, there is a little bit of effort required. But once the piece of iron gets inside the magnetic field, the magnet automatically attracts. So Krishna then attracts us, and our attraction to Krishna makes it effortless to overcome the forces of the three gunas. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. When one is in an ocean, one gets tossed by the various waves in the ocean and one becomes very vulnerable. But the moment there is a lifeline coming from a helicopter and one catches that lifeline, the waves are still there, but one is no longer vulnerable to the waves. So Krishna says the only way to overcome the forces of three gunas is bhakti yoga. Mam chayo abhyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. With that bhakti being the fuel, one gets on to that highway of attaining Krishna, and one can easily overcome the forces of sattva, rajas and tamas, overcome the forces of the three gunas and reach that supreme state, attain Bhagavan. And Krishna says that attainment is only possible not by focusing on fighting the three gunas all the time. That fight, there is no end. One needs to focus not on the fight with the three gunas, but one needs to focus on attaining Krishna. When the direction is towards Krishna, then automatically one attains him effortlessly, overcoming the forces of three gunas. So Krishna here gives a simple answer to Arjuna's question. What are the internal characteristics of a gunAtita? What are the external characteristics of a gunAtita? And how to transcend the three gunas of Prakriti? It is, the simple answer here is focus. Focus on the purpose of life and living. When one gets a complete focus on purpose of life and living, which is connection with Krishna. When the focus is on life and living, and when the focus is not on the commentary about life and living, because the mind is always giving a commentary on our own life. Now, if we are only listening to the mind, which is essentially the byproducts of three gunas, then one completely loses focus on the purpose of life. It is like Imagine if a batsman on the cricket field also can listen to the commentary. Now, along with playing, he also can listen to the commentary. What would happen? Now, the batsman is playing well, but the commentator may pass on comments saying the batsman possibly hit a beautiful shot. The commentator may say it's all a fluke. Now, if the batsman is listening to the commentator instead of focusing on the match, he would completely lose the plot. And on top of it, imagine if there is a panel of various commentators, each commentator making their own comments. And if the panel happens to be led by somebody like Arnab Goswami saying the nation wants to know, and if the batsman is playing a shot and all of a sudden the nation wants to know why the batsman played a defensive shot instead of hitting a six, and the batsman will completely lose the plot. The mind is filled with various kinds of commentators, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, making commentaries on life all the time. There are various kinds of thoughts, various kinds of emotions coming and going all the time. Instead of listening to the commentary on life made by our mind, the jiva needs to focus on life and living. The focus on life and living is the purpose of the life and living. The purpose of the batsman is to focus on the match, to do well. The purpose of life and living is to focus on one's connection with Krishna. If one focuses on connecting with him through bhakti yoga, then once that connection happens, then one completely can overcome the forces of the three gunas. So Krishna, towards the end of 14th chapter, once again reiterates the significance of bhakti yoga in overcoming the influence of the three gunas, in attaining freedom from Prakriti and enjoying the eternal bliss of communion with him. Now, this eventually would lead to Krishna's summary of all the three tattvas. So in the 13th chapter and in the 14th chapter, Krishna focused in his elucidation on the Achit Tattva and the Chit Tattva. In the 15th chapter, he would conclude his exposition on the Tattvatraya through focus on the third Tattva, the Bhagavad Tattva, the Purushottama Tattva, in the 15th chapter of Purushottama Yoga. There is no question that Arjuna asks in the 15th chapter. There is no question that Arjuna asks in the 16th chapter. Arjuna's 17th question happens in the 17th chapter. The next session, we will see what is the context for Arjuna's 17th question. And after the answer to Arjuna's 17th question comes the 18th and the most important question, the question of all questions, which happens to be the very first shloka of the 18th chapter, which would pave the way for us to do a deep dive into the 18th chapter. Until then, let us continue to reflect on the gunAtita, the internal characteristics and the external characteristics, and the process of transcending the three gunas of Prakriti. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.